Morning, good morning. Everybody's all spread out, you should get to know each other a little better, That's how, by the way, that's how a lot of people get green cards, Good morning, my name's Alan Wernick. I'm the director of CUNY Citizenship Now. I want to welcome you here. We're so pleased that so many of you have come out. We'll have the largest attendance, this is our 13th call-in. And we'll have the largest attendance at this training today, and in terms of volunteers to the call-in that we've ever had in those 13 years. I want to keep my remarks short because we have a full program this morning and, of course, an all-day program where you're going to be learning a lot about immigration and citizenship law. But I do want to say that, part of what we'll be talking about, as you know, the Congress and the courts are still debating immigration reform and what to do about deferred action. We're going to be talking about that. That's my topic. It's after lunch. I have some thoughts about what's going to happen in the future. I don't want to tell you now because I want you to come back after lunch. But the thesis of our call-in this year, our approach to the call-in this year, is that Congress is debating, the courts are debating, but we're not waiting. We're going forward. We're going to go ahead and help people who can qualify for citizenship become citizens. They can help then their families get permanent residence. There are other benefits that people qualify for. And we do think that eventually deferred action, the President's expanded deferred action program will go forward, and we want to prepare people for that. And you'll hear more about our event on May 16th. We're going to have a large citywide event. We hope to help more than 600 people prepare for the DACA DAPA program. Before I go forward with with introducing some of our guests, I want to thank some of the people that helped put this all together. Many of them are outside the room now, so if you're here, please stand up. I can't really see. I think most of the people that helped are outside, but I want you to meet them over the day and at the call-in. Stina Rosenquist, who's our volunteer coordinator. Many of you know her. Leonela Startseva, who is our events coordinator, who organized a lot of these things. We have a new events organizer, coordinator, special projects manager, and I don't think she's in the room, Ebony Mason. Please look for her throughout the day. Our special projects team that Leonela manages, Joseph Ranson, I don't think he's in the room either, but he's one of our operatives at the central office of CUNY, and of course, all the people from the CUNY Citizenship Now staff who work hard every single day to help New Yorkers. We expect about 300 people today, maybe 75 people watching online, so shout out to those of you who are watching online. We have friends in California again this year. The event is co-sponsored by the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials Education Fund. Their people are in California. They're going to be taking some of the overflow calls from CUNY Citizenship Now, Daily News CUNY Citizenship Now on April 27th through May 1st. We expect more than 350 volunteers on the phones. I will make a mention of other sponsors and guests later in the morning, but our first speaker that I'd like to invite to the podium is Jay Hershenson. This would not be happening without Jay Hershenson. He is the vision, he is the resources, the brains, and the political leader of this effort, so we want to give him a big welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, professor, director, attorney, columnist, and friend of everybody here, Alan Wernick. Do we love Alan Wernick? This is our 13th annual Daily News CUNY Citizenship Now call-in. And as I look out in the audience, so let me just ask a quick question. Is there anyone in the audience who was at the first call-in 13 years ago? Stand up and be acknowledged. Look at this. All right. Now, is there anyone in the audience who is a repeater? someone who has volunteered and worked in a prior call-in? Please raise your hands. Stand up and be acknowledged. Come on, stand up. You're the reason why we're here today. Fantastic. I love the fact that there's a real mix of those who have been with us for the past call-ins and those of you who are new to Citizenship Now for the first time. I want to give a warm hello to the partners that are represented here, particularly from the New York Daily News. My friend Arthur Brown, who is the head of the editorial board of the Daily News. I mentioned to Arthur a little earlier in the day that I just finished reading, I guess it's an early copy of a book that will be coming out this summer called A Righteous Man, which is the story of Samuel Battle, the first African-American police officer in the history of New York City. I'm going to recommend it to everyone here, not just in the context of the backdrop that it presents with respect to many events in the 20th century, but also very much against the backdrop of many of the events that have occurred in our country in law enforcement. It's going to be extremely timely, and I recommend it to all of you. But when I think of Arthur Brown, I think of that first call-in when I guess we were at the old location of the Daily News in the low 30s, all the way over on the west side. And I remember Arthur being there from his office, and I was there that morning with Alan Wernick, and we had such high hopes with respect to this first Citizenship Now call-in. And what do you think happened? The phones crashed. And the reason why they crashed was because we could not even begin to predict how many New Yorkers would be calling in for the first time. It just was not possible. And everybody had to scurry around and figure out what needed to be done. With a lot of help from our technical friends, we were able to get the phones back up and running. And it's been a complete and successful run ever since. In fact, during the course of the last 12 annual call-ins, we have served over 136,000 individuals. 136,000 individuals, and of course, their family members indirectly. There is no call-in, there is no program of its kind anywhere in the United States of America that has been able to accomplish such a phenomenal result. And that includes close to 13,000 callers last year alone, while our phones were staffed by 314 volunteers. As of today, as Alan indicated, almost 300 volunteers are registered for the training, and I guess 422 are registered to attend the call-in next week. I also want to acknowledge the fact that the City of New York, through its commissioner, Nisha Agarwal, has been extremely supportive, and the city, of course, is to be commended for its work on the identity program. And I want to pay particular tribute to Univision 41 news anchor, Jose Vieira. I'm on the Hispanic Federation Board of Directors, and the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Univision happens to be the chair of Hispanic Federation, so I've gotten to know a lot about the great work of Univision as well as the individuals involved, so we're extremely pleased. And as Alan has indicated, we have many co-sponsors. Some of them have been mentioned. I was particularly happy to see WABC TV come aboard in the last few years, and Cisco and Presidio and Microsoft and Radio WADO and 92.7 FM among the many media sponsors, and the organizations were listed earlier. You'll be hearing more about them as we move through the program. So this is just incredibly exciting. I do want to thank President Chase Robinson and his staff here at the Graduate Center for hosting this all-day training session. And I want to thank the students and faculty and staff of the City University of New York, because the law school has played a key role, particularly from the early days through its legal clinics and its commitment to the rights and responsibilities of immigrants. Gutman Community College served as the host during the last few years, and President Scott Evenbeck and his staff have been absolutely phenomenal. And the students, faculty, staff, alumni of CUNY are very much interspersed among the volunteers and the participants of the call-in. And why not? This is a university that has historically served so many waves of immigrants. Our students today hail from over 205 countries. They speak over 100 languages. CUNY has always been the place in our city, in America, welcoming immigrants and providing for their acculturation, their socialization, their education, the opportunity for immigrants to move up in society and take their rightful place. So this call-in, this program, which is part of a year-round effort that Alan and the great team at Citizenship Now put into effect all year round, is very much consistent with the historic mission of the City University of New York. Let me close just with a personal note. You know, it's amazing. Much of what we do involves looking ahead and keeping up with all of the changes around us. But every once in a while, something occurs that harkens us back to the past. And just this past Friday, I received an email from a long-lost cousin who I have never met. I have no idea who she is. And she wrote to me to ask about my father, who emigrated to the United States from Poland. He was able to get out just a little bit before World War II. Some members of his family were able to escape the Holocaust that was taking place in Europe. And she wrote because she is the daughter of my father's sister, and she has a passenger ship ticket from some type of freighter that came across and brought her mom from Europe. And she wanted to know the story of my father and whether or not I had ever talked about it. I did mention that I had written an op-ed piece for the Daily News where I referenced my father in the piece. And it brought back a wave of memories, but it was just another reminder that here we are at this point in time, looking ahead, but at the same time, we have to remember where we came from. And in fact, all of us are either immigrants or the sons and daughters of immigrants or migrants or those who came to this country, some voluntarily, some not voluntarily, but we all ended up in the place where dreams come true. And that really is the story of America. And each of us, I would suspect, brings our own special perspective to the work that we're doing through Citizenship Now, because our goal is to provide help and support for all those who need it. So I'm really here to pay tribute to you, and I know that you'll join me in appreciating the fact that there really are only two kinds of people in the world: those who cannot remember where they came from and those who cannot forget. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. People always ask me, how do you do all this? How do you do all this? And there's the man who makes it happen. Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to recognize Erica Pearson. Could you stand up, Erica? Erica is with the Daily News. She'll be reporting on today and the call-in. She does a terrific job. New York's a very, very complicated city, as we all know, and she manages to get out there and cover the stories of immigrant life in a way that no other reporter in New York City does. And I'm very proud to be part of an organization, the Daily News, that has a reporter like Erica. Now, I've been at the Daily News about 21 years now, and people always ask me, well, how did you get that job? You're really good friends with Mortimer Zuckerman, the owner. You know somebody in the inside. Some people even think I got it because I really knew a lot about immigration law. That was a minority. But it's a complicated story. I'm not sure I really know how I got the job at the Daily News, but one thing I do know is that Arthur Brown, who's the editorial page editor, was the key to that. You know, he had interviewed me about 9 months before I started writing for the paper, and one morning I get a call from, and the woman says, please hold on for Mortimer Zuckerman. I said, okay, I'm going to hold on. Of course I'll hold on for Mortimer Zuckerman. And he, invited me to write for the paper. And I knew that lurking in the shadows behind that phone call was Arthur Brown. So he has been a big supporter of my work at the News. And I just want to tell you one other little anecdote. A few weeks after I started writing for the News, the governor of California came out with a full-page ad in the LA Times basically denouncing immigrants and calling for very, very restrictive policy in California to take benefits away from them. And I spoke to Arthur Brown about it, and I was asked to write an op-ed piece, counterpoint to an op-ed piece that Pete Wilson was going to write. And I said, well, when do you need it? He says, well, Wilson's people says he can have it by tomorrow morning. And I said, well, but Wilson has a huge staff. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He says, yes, but you're better. Now, that wasn't true, by the way. I don't think that was true. But him saying that got me through the week. And remember, I had only started writing for the News maybe a few weeks before. It was a big deal. I'm writing opposite the governor of California. But I always remember that because that kind of leadership and inspiration got me through that week and has really helped me get through my whole career at the News. So, Arthur, please come up and say a few words.
Good morning. I really have to laugh. I mean, that was the best job description I've ever had, that I'm somebody who lurks in the shadows. And when I told Alan that he was better, that was just a fantastic editor's trick that you just tell anybody they're really terrific and they'll do what you want. But I did believe it. Now, since he brought up the history, and I'll tell a little story that will help to explain why the Daily News got involved in this crusade, why we're totally committed to it, why we think it's hugely important for millions of people, hugely important for New York City, and hugely important for the Daily News. We'll go back almost 25 years now. An editor at the Daily News looks around and says, I think New York City is changing. I see people delivering my lunch. I don't know who these people are. We don't know who these people are. Something important is happening in New York City that we as a newspaper do not understand, and we need to go find out what it was. I was a senior editor at the paper at the time, and he asked me to go off and take 3 to 6 months and look at the changing face of New York City, which I did, and that's how I met Alan. And we produced the first comprehensive series at that time that explained the beginnings of the torrent that was to come and the monumental changes that were to come for New York City. And I did meet Alan. I believe his office was in Lower Manhattan near City Hall or near Canal Street or something, and I have a memory we're on a second floor he had a kind of an arched window behind him. And I was hugely impressed by the amount that he knew as a immigration lawyer and how easily he could explain it. And he became a tour guide to me for the legalities of the immigration system and the history of the immigration system. And that did lead to Mort Zuckerman's call, and it led to the column, and eventually it led to Citizenship Now, and it led to all of this. And so I have to thank all of you for participating and giving so much of yourselves, devoting yourselves to this great effort to help people who need help. And they really do. This is a terrible immigration system. It's far too complicated. It's far too punishing. It's far too costly on people. It serves no good purpose to be as punitive as it is and as restrictive as it is. And in fact, it does great damage both to people to New York City, and to America. If you go back, immigration in years gone by, in the big wave of immigration, it was viewed as, now we look back, those are golden years, people who were the children of immigrants, of the past waves of immigrants. Look back that the Irish came, the Italians came, the Germans came, the Eastern Europeans came. And they honor it, and they write, and they remember. When that happened, New York City was on the rise. It was becoming the modern New York City. And New York City would not have become the great power that it did without the influx of those people. Immigration fell away for a while, and then it picked up. Today's New York City would not be the New York City that we have without the waves of immigration that have come since 1980 or so and beyond. New York City would not have 8.4 million people today. Neighborhoods that were dead are coming back to life, have come back to life. Whole business sectors are dependent on immigrant labor and the children of immigrants. This is the future of New York City. It's the future of the Daily News. The early waves of immigrants, they were the Daily News readers. We built a huge circulation on people from other countries. And one of the paper's major roles was to help people acculturate at that point to life in the United States. That was an important role the Daily News played. It spoke plainly to people. It spoke good English, simple English, and people learned. We still believe that that is the role of the Daily News in terms of newcomers to New York. That's why we're involved. We believe it's the future of New York. We believe it's the future of our newspaper. And we believe it's the future for millions and millions of people. So I cannot thank you enough. Without you, none of this would be possible. Without people who are willing to take the time, devote the energy, devote their hearts, devote their souls to helping people, to answering, to providing the information, none of this would be possible. So, on behalf of the Daily News, on behalf of CUNY, which I must thank as well because they've been fantastic partners, and Alan and everybody else who was involved, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. By the way, I want to thank the crew, Bob Isaacson from the director of CUNY TV, and the crew in the back there, please. So in addition to being live streamed on the internet, this is being recorded. A link will be posted on the CUNY Citizenship Now website, so if you feel like you missed anything, you can go back and check it out. I also want to thank, if you look at your materials, I mean, they're just fantastic, and there's a tremendous amount of work goes into that. In terms of all the graphics and production part of it, led by Sofia Carreño, who you're going to meet in a second, David, Gabe, and Anne-Marie. I don't think they're in the room. I don't know if they're in the room, but if they are, let's give them a big hand. And I just see that Tamara Bloom and Tom Shea are in the house, so let's give them a big hand. They were responsible for putting together the legal part of this program, and you're going to meet them later on. Our next speaker, we're very fortunate to have with us, but not just here with us now, but with us in the city of New York, and that's our Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Nisha Agarwal. Now, there has never been in any city, not just in New York City, an operation that got up and running so fast and has accomplished so much in such a short amount of time as the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs under Mayor de Blasio. Just Sunday, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs organized an event where more than 600 people received counseling by truly by true experts on their eligibility for deferred action, but for many other benefits as well. It was an amazing thing. CUNY Citizenship Now was one of the participating organizations. I was there the whole day. It was just an amazing thing. And those kinds of things would never have happened under any other administration, under any other commissioner. And I'm not just saying that to suck up, you know. It's absolutely true. So we're very pleased to have with us Commissioner Agarwal.
Thank you so much, Alan and CUNY Citizenship Now. Thank you also to Senior Vice Chancellor Jay Hershenson for having me here, and the Daily News as well. But most importantly, thank you to all of you, the volunteers who make CUNY Citizenship Now, and as a result of that, our city and our immigrant communities thrive and be able to access the benefits and services, some of the most complicated to access that there are, more easily and more fully. For those of you who don't know, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs is essentially a bridge between City Hall and New York City's many very diverse immigrant communities. And we have a very simple mission, which is to promote programs and policies that improve the lives of immigrant families all across New York City. And one of our closest and most important partners in that work has really been CUNY and CUNY Citizenship Now. Several years ago, we started a partnership to run citizenship workshops in partnership with CUNY in public schools around the city, and those have been very successful and a sort of core part of the work that we do as an office. And now, as Alan mentioned, we've started to expand that partnership to start looking at work to support parents as well as young people who may be applying for the new Immigration Executive Action programs. And what I've loved about working with CUNY over the past year that I've been in this role, but really even before that, is the commitment to providing excellent service to immigrant families at a large scale, because there really is a huge amount of need in New York City, and in collaboration with New Yorkers like you who want to step up and help out. And we've learned a lot, actually, from that model. We've started engaging New Yorkers all around the city to help volunteer with a number of different programs that we're doing. And what we found is that immigrants and New Yorkers who want to work with immigrants are very eager to step up and help out and volunteer for a number of different programs. And I think that was really exemplified this weekend for the screening event that we held in Manhattan, where we had something like 900 people show up on a Sunday, and 600 people were screened, many more interested, and so we'll continue our partnership with CUNY in making those services available. And I think this is a very historic moment to be involved in immigration work. There's obviously the national dialogue that's happening around immigration reform around the country, but also a nice time to reflect on where we've come from. So this is also the 50th anniversary of the immigration reforms that passed in 1965. And they mean a lot to me. That was a sort of reform that really desegregated our borders. It eliminated racial quotas in the immigration system. That made it possible for my parents to come to the United States, and I think it truly contributed to the tremendous diversity that we see in New York City right now in terms of immigrant communities. And so at the end of the week, we'll be kicking off our annual Immigrant Heritage Week, and we'll really be looking at these questions of sort of historically, how did the civil rights movement and other movements for social change contribute to these massive reforms in immigration law? And what's our responsibility today, where there's a sort of comparable immigrant rights movement, to also advance progressive change in immigration laws. So really looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you again for the wonderful work that you do. I'm sure our paths will cross again. And once again, thank you so much to CUNY, the Daily News, and all of you. Thank you.
We have to move along. I'm told I'm running a little late. I do want to thank Graciela Garcia. She's in the back, please, from the Daily News. And I don't know, is Brian Adams in the room? Also, they're the two people. Brian, please stand up. Oh, there he is. Stand. They're the people from the Daily News that have been working very closely with CUNY Citizenship Now to help organize the call-in. And they're really fun people, so you should introduce yourselves and get to know them. Every year, those of you who are repeat visitors to our training know that one of the things we really look forward to is presenting to you people whose lives have been changed by the CUNY Daily News Citizenship Now call-in. And we have two such people here with us today. And to introduce them, I invite to the stage Sofia Carreño, our Communications and College Relations Specialist. Sofia.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, first, I want to begin by thanking the staff of CUNY Citizenship Now, who helped us with the effort of recruiting the callers that I'm about to introduce. In particular, thanks to Alex La Peña, who is in charge of our participant database, to Sidra Kali, Daisy Velez, and Wazi Estelle Yasso, who made hundreds of calls, and to our attorneys Andres Lemons, Luz Medrano, and Maggie Kawinski, who helped in this effort. Thank you, all of you. So now, calling after calling, you have answered thousands of calls and given the gift of your time and knowledge to individuals that you know you will never meet. We know that you provide this service not to receive a thank you, but because you believe in public service, have a sense of social justice, and because you want to make a better society for all. Yet, we like that you have the opportunity to meet one of the people that you have helped every year. And this is definitely not an easy task. As you know, calls are anonymous, and but I must tell you that meeting individuals like the ones I am about to introduce is definitely, and getting to know their stories is definitely one of the most rewarding parts of the work that I do here at Citizenship Now. Magella Philip and Rocio Asensio are two women who come from very different backgrounds. Magella came to the United States when she was a young girl to meet her parents, while Rocio came here as an adult with her 3 children, Otoniel, Nancy, and Fernando, to join her mother. Magella is from Grenada, and Rocio is from El Salvador. But both Magella and Rocio share something in common. They were brought together today by the efforts of all our partners, our sponsors, volunteers, and staff, who led them through what it is an intimidating and for many an achievable path, the path to citizenship. They are both now United States citizens and very thankful for your service. So let's hear first from Rocio. Rocio, please. And I must say that Rocio chose to speak in Spanish, so I'm going to be interpreting what she says as she speaks, okay?
En Spanish. Buenos días a todos. Me agrada mucho compartir mi historia con ustedes. El año pasado, una amiga estaba viendo Univision cuando vi la información vio la campaña de Daily News en CUNY. Ella recordó que yo le había dicho que quería sacar la ciudadanía, tomó el número telefónico y me lo dio, diciéndome que había una posibilidad de aplicar a la ciudadanía de manera gratuita. Llamé al día siguiente al número que me dio ella, me contestaron inmediatamente y me dieron una cita para ir al evento en John Jay College. En el pasado había llamado a otros números que me daban y no me podía comunicar, pero no fue así con este servicio.
So last year in April, my friend was watching Univision and she saw the information about the CUNY Daily News campaign. She remembered that I had told her that I wanted to get my citizenship, so she took the number and gave it to me, telling me that there was a possibility of applying for citizenship for free. I called the next day the number she gave me. When they picked up the phone, they gave me an appointment to go to the John Jay College event. In the past, I had called other numbers that people gave me, and I could not get through, but it was not the case with this service.
Lo que me dijo mi amiga me pareció que era una oportunidad única, ya que hace muchos años quería obtener la ciudadanía, pero no sabía cómo hacerlo, y además le tenía miedo a las preguntas.
So when I heard what my friend told me, I thought this was a unique opportunity, since for many years I had wanted to get my citizenship, but I had not known how, and I was also afraid of the questions.
Cuando fui al evento en John Jay College, me ayudaron a llenar la aplicación, el fee waiver, y me tomaron las fotografías. Salí de ahí con el paquete listo para enviar a inmigración. El 30 de diciembre del 2014 me juramenté como ciudadana. Me siento muy agradecida con los voluntarios del programa porque me ayudaron a alcanzar mi sueño que pensaba era inalcanzable.
When I went to the event at John Jay College, they helped me complete the application, the fee waiver, and they took my photos. I left with a packet ready to send to immigration. On December 30th of 2014, I swore in as a U.S. citizen. Oh, sorry. I feel very thankful with the volunteers of this program because you helped me reach my dream, which I thought was unreachable.
Hoy me siento más confiada con mi estatus de ciudadana, pues hoy puedo votar, puedo estar más tiempo fuera del país y viajar con libertad. Y tengo mayor libertad de expresión. Gracias a todos.
Today, I feel more secure with my citizenship because I can vote, I can spend more time abroad and travel with more freedom, and I feel that I have more freedom of expression. Thanks to everyone. Okay, now Magella, Philip, the mic is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My name is Magella Phillip. I stand before you today grateful and proud to announce that I'm officially and finally a United States citizen. Yeah! I have proof! I have been a permanent resident for over 26 years and the only non-citizen of my family. I've always wanted to take the steps to citizenship, but I had no idea how to go about it, how to start. What is the first step? Frustrated, I almost gave up, but my desire to be part of the electoral process, to vote, to have the option of participating in a political campaign kept me hopeful. I wanted to be able to critique or to cheer on political candidates, but I had no voice. Then one night, I sat watching my favorite news channel, 7, and they were doing a promotion for people that needed help getting their citizenship. I called the number they provided, and that call changed everything, taking me from point A to Z with minimal effort. The staff of the Immigration Center at Mega Community College helped fill out forms, made appointments, informed and reminded me of upcoming appointments, intervened and handled all unforeseen changes when they arose. Because of their dedication and professionalism, I was able to obtain something I was hoping for years. The best part was I was unemployed and was unable to finance this endeavor. But through the CUNY and New York Daily News event, all fees were waived. Thank you to all the people who put their time and effort in making this process possible and making dreams come true. And thank you, Channel 7, for that very important first step. I am now a U.S. citizen of this great country. And all it cost me was bus fare. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, if we could have our photo taken with our...
Yeah, and we are presenting also a little gift for Rocio and Magella because we feel that it's very important what they are doing today. Because basically, they're sharing their story so that other people like them know that the service is available and so that they call us during the week, April 27th to May 1st. Thank you very much.
Okay. That's okay. Okay, everybody look this way, please. Ready? Just a couple more. Ready? Okay, over here. Over here.
Today, we have a very special guest. We have a true media star. And it's always nice when a person is famous and important and is recognized, though, not just for being famous and important, but for their contribution to the struggle that we care so much about. To put it another way, this person actually deserves to be up on the stage, not just because he's famous, but because of the work he does. We're very pleased today to have Jorge Vieira from Univision. His program is the leading local news program in the country. He knows the issue of immigration and immigration rights and citizenship. He and Univision have been at the forefront of the struggle for immigrants' rights in our nation. Univision is again a supporter and sponsor of our event this year, so it's a great pleasure to introduce Jorge Vieira.
Thank you so much. That's a great presentation. I don't know if I'm famous, but I'm here working with you guys. Univision ha apoyado esta causa. Univision has helped this matter for 13 years, así que estamos muy contentos de estar aquí. I have a segment in my newscast that I think is going to work well with this program. I take selfies with people outside on the street and all that, and it's been very popular. Everywhere I go, people want to take a selfie with me. So what I want to do with you guys is every time you're working, with people and all that, I want you to take a selfie, and I will put it on the newscast. That way people can participate with us. Since 11 o'clock, we're the number one newscast. We beat everybody in the market. So I want to help those people, and if our newscast get participated with people that are applying to the citizenship, I think it's going to help. So I'm very happy to be here. We will put this on the news starting on the 27th. The week of the 27th, I will be there 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I will put it on the brief. And at 11 o'clock after the weather, I will put the selfies. So the best selfies, I will put it on the air. We can put 3 on the daily basis. And that will help, the program. Like it? So I'm going to leave my email with her. If you need anything on the newscast, whatever, you can write me, and we can work together, because I'm always open to help the community. I'm not running for anything. I'm just working on Univision. They're good.
Okay, so we have something new and different and special this year. You know, you're gonna learn a lot about the deferred action programs today in terms of substance. I told you that after lunch I'm going to talk to you about the policy and politics of it. But we want you to get a feel of how important your work is. We know that you know it, but it's always helpful to be reminded. You've seen two people that became citizens because of the work that you have done, and we want you to have a strong understanding of the work that you will be doing the week of April 27th. So I want to invite Monique Francis, our Deputy Director of CUNY Citizenship Now, to introduce the Faces of DACA.
Good morning, folks. So with the Texas court decision a few days away, we wanted to introduce two CUNY students whose lives have transformed from the 2012 DACA program. I invite now to the stage Elizabeth and Gibbsy. Come on up. We expect that a lot of the calls that you're going to be getting throughout the week is from people who are seeking information about deferred action. So here to tell their stories today. Come on up, guys.
Good morning. My name is Gypsy Lino. I came to the United States when I was 13 years old from Honduras. After high school, I was accepted into the first freshman class when CUNY opened the new community college, now known as Government Community College. With DACA, I received work authorization, and I am currently working as a peer mentor at Government Community College. In 2014, I graduated with honors, and I also won the Dream US Scholarship. Winning the scholarship allowed me to continue my bachelor's degree at Lehman College. With DACA, I am now able to work and remain in the U.S. without fear of being deported. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. My name is Elizabeth Villegas, and I am a full-time student at Lehman College. I'm also working at CUNY Service Corps as an intern with CUNY Citizenship Now. I came to the United States when I was 2 years old. With assistance from CUNY Citizenship Now, I was able to apply for advanced parole. I was able to return to Mexico on a study abroad program. Rosana Eugenio, a staff attorney here at CUNY Citizenship Now, encouraged me to apply to the Dream US Scholarship. With the scholarship, I am able to continue my education, and DACA has helped me to meet all these wonderful people and continue my education, which I'm very happy. Thank you.
So can I get a bigger round of applause for these two students? Because in spite of their immigration challenges, they've continued their education. Thank you, guys.
Terrific. Okay. We are right on time. By the way, did you know that was not Jim McGovern, who's the deputy director. Some of you know him. He's off on vacation somewhere traveling the world. Monique Francis was promoted into that position about 9 months ago. She's doing a fantastic job. Also, I want to, before we start the substantive part of the program, I want to remind you that we have a reception at 5 o'clock. We'll have a very lovely food for you and drink. We'll be honoring Julissa Gutierrez for her service to immigrants' rights, formerly with the, well, you'll learn more about her later. I don't want to spend too much time on that. We're going to start the substantive program. The people who have put that program together are Tom Shea and Tamara Bloom. Tom is going to be chairing the rest of the day. I'll see you after lunch.
Thank you, Alan. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name's Tom Shea. I'm the program chair for today's training. Thank you all, partners, sponsors, speakers, volunteers, and CUNY Citizenship Now staff for being here today. We rely on all of you to make the call-in a huge success, and we thank you for participating. Having you all here means that you'll be all up to speed on the information that you'll be providing during the call-in and be prepared to provide accurate information to callers. In this morning's session, you all received the training program today. You'll see that for the morning session, we'll introduce you to some basic concepts and terminology used in immigration, as well as give you an overview of how people get lawful permanent residence and how they get their green cards. And then discuss President Obama's programs for deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA, and deferred action for parents of Americans and lawful permanent residents, DAPA. The morning session will end with a question and answer panel. Please hold off on asking questions. Each of you, when you received your program, should have received 2 index cards inside the program. If you have questions for this morning's session, please write your questions down on those index cards and then hand them off to the staff. Staff will be there to pick them up. Now, let's review what's in your folders today. You all received today this folder. If you open it up, on the right side of the packet, on the right side of the packet is the presenter and panelist biographies. And then behind that is the visa bulletin for April 2015. And then behind that are the PowerPoint slides for all of today. So you can take notes on those handouts, on the PowerPoint handouts. In the left side of your folder, you will find the pink Getting Started handout, which includes instructions for how to operate the phones, the greeting for callers, and instructions about how to transfer calls to the RSVP appointment phone line for callers interested in registering for our May 16th citywide Deferred Action Day, which you will hear more about from the presenters throughout the day. Behind that, you'll also find the volunteer guidelines for volunteering with us. And then behind that, you'll have information for volunteers to get to the call-in center. It includes directions to the Gutman Community College for the site of the call-in. And behind that, we have a flyer to volunteer with us for our May 16th citywide Deferred Action Day. Please volunteer with us on that day. We appreciate all the help that you can provide to us. And then behind that, the final handout is a graduate certificate in immigration law from CUNY School of Professional Studies. SPS is one of our sponsors, and this brochure provides helpful information if you are interested in studying immigration. Now, again, for the folks in the audience, please hold your questions for the presenters until the Q&A session following the morning presentations. If you have questions for the presenters during the Q&A session, please write them on the index cards that I mentioned before and pass them to your staff to collect, to our staff. They will be on the side aisles. For the folks watching at home, you can send us your questions using the chat box on the right side of your screen. All viewers here and at home can send their questions via our Facebook page at Citizenship Now or via Twitter at CUNY Citizenship using hashtag Citizenship Now. Or you can email questions for the presenters at cunycitizenshipnow@gmail.com. I also just want to let you all know, unfortunately, we will not be able to use the iClickers this morning. We do not have the master iClicker. So there will be poll questions throughout the day for the different presentations, but the presenters will read the poll questions and go through the responses and then ask you to raise your hands to see what the audience says about what your choices are for the potential responses. So I apologize for the inconvenience. So with that, I would like to, but I know that they've already handed out the iClickers to you, so please remember before you leave today to please return the iClickers to staff at the end of the day. And with this, I would like to introduce our first speaker. And I won't go through all the biographies. As I mentioned before, you have the biography handout with you for all the presenters. It goes into all the details. But for our first presentation is Immigration 101, and our presenter is Maribel Hernandez Rivera, who is the Executive Director for Executive Action for the New York City Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, MOIA. So with that, give a round of applause for Maribel. Come on up.
Buenos dias, bon dia, bonjour. How are you doing? Are you doing well? All right, well, as you can see, I'm very excited to be here for many reasons. As Nisha mentioned, CUNY is a great partner of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, but also on a personal level, I came to the United States when I was 13 years old, and I was undocumented for many years of my life, so I know how much having these types of programs really benefit the people who you're going to be communicating with over the phone. So thank you all for being here. Now, the purpose of my presentation is just to make sure that we have some terminology that we all understand. We understand the basic statuses, and we understand the basic abbreviations. And also, I'm not going to go into detail about everything I'm going to talk about. Some of the other presenters will. And I want to make sure that you know, you all have your guide. I call this the Bible because it's really, really, really helpful. So I will make sure to tell you where in this guide you can find more information about the issues that I'll be covering. But remember, you cannot give legal advice. So when somebody calls you and asks a question, you can provide information, but no legal advice. So let's get started. So why is immigration status important? Many of you already know it, but let's just review it to make sure we all understand. Number one, your immigration status determines whether or not you can be removed or, as is commonly said, deported from the United States. For example, a United States citizen cannot be removed from the United States unless they acquire citizenship fraudulently. But that's it. So once you become a citizen, you're really, really protected. All other statuses are not. You can have, for example, a green card holder who has been here for many, many, many years, but for some reason gets in trouble with the law. Well, if they get in trouble with the law and that trouble makes it so that they're removable, after 20, 30, 50 years of being in the United States, they can be sent back to their country of origin. So immigration status is therefore very, very important. The other thing is, immigration status allows you, once you're authorized to be in the United States, to work. So you get a work authorization, an employment authorization document. And with that, you can choose the job that you can go to. With that, you can apply for a social security number. And we know that that's important because it allows us to get identification, and it also allows us to start getting retirement benefits in the future. And then, depending on your immigration status, you might have the ability to petition for your relatives. Now, not all immigration statuses give you this ability, but some of them do. So that's why we need to know what is your immigration status. And of course, not everybody can apply for public benefits. Again, that's dependent on your immigration status. If you are a US citizen, you have the doors open and you can apply for a public benefit. But if you're not, you have to be more careful and you have to consult with somebody who knows. And as we heard this morning, becoming a US citizen gives you the right to vote in federal elections. So it's really important to know what your immigration status is. So I'm an immigration lawyer, and what do I do when I'm trying to figure out whether somebody qualifies or does not qualify for an immigration status? There's two things I want to know. One, immigration history, and two, criminal history. So let's go back to immigration history. I want to know the immigration history for the person who wants to petition or apply for a benefit, but I also want to know the immigration history for their family members, because it could be that their family members have petitioned for that person in the past, and the outcome of that petition could be key for what they qualify for in the future. I also want to know any history or any contact that they have had with immigration authorities. So for example, my dad came here undocumented. He crossed the border. If I was trying to figure out whether or not he qualified for an immigration benefit, I would want to know, were you caught by the immigration authorities? If you were, what happened? Were you in deportation proceedings in front of a judge? So I want to know all that information. So that's why immigration history is really important. The other part that's really important is criminal history. Now, criminal history is just shorthand because criminal has a very loaded meaning, but in immigration, unfortunately, criminal means almost anything. I jumped the turnstile. We might think that that's not a big deal, that's, why should we worry about it? Unfortunately, in immigration, many of the contacts that you have with the law can affect whether or not you either qualify for a benefit or even worse, whether you can be removed from the United States. So anytime I meet with somebody and I'm trying to determine whether they qualify for an immigration benefit, I want to know any contact with the law, whether that was with the MTA police, with the NYPD, with family court, anything having to do with the law, I want to know. Now, as you all know, immigration law is very complicated, and this will be shown by all the different federal agencies that are involved in the enforcement of immigration law, enforcement and also the implementation of immigration law. So let's start with DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security has many branches, and 3 of them deal with immigration. 1, ICE, which is the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. 2, USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. And 3, CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol. Now, ICE and CBP are in charge of implementing and enforcing immigration law. So again, let's go back to my example. When my dad crossed the border, he could have been met by CBP officers, caught because he was coming here undocumented, and then put into ICE custody because they were trying to remove him, trying to send him back. So those 2 branches deal with implementation and enforcement. And then there's USCIS, which is different. USCIS deals with applications. So if I am here and I want to apply for citizenship, I apply to USCIS. I don't apply to the other 2. If I am here and I want to apply for temporary protected status, we will talk about what that is later on. But if I want to apply for a benefit, I will apply to USCIS. So that's DHS. After DHS, we now have the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, under it has the Executive Office of Immigration Review, EOR. And that's where you have all of the immigration judges. So if my dad had been caught by CBP, taken into ICE custody, and then put in removal proceedings, he would be in front of an immigration judge, and so his documents will now be in front of EOR. Next, now we're going to go abroad. Say we have somebody who's from Jamaica and wants to get a visa to come to the United States. They're not going to go through DHS. They're not going to go through the Department of Justice. They're going to go through the Department of State, through the National Visa Center. That's where you go. You go to an embassy, you go to a consulate, and you ask for, you ask to get a visa. That's through the National Visa Center of the Department of State. Now, that's 3 agencies already. We still have some more to go. Another one is the Department of Labor. We have heard that some people are able to come to the United States because their employers petition for them. Well, all of the employment petitions go through the Department of Labor. And finally, we also have the Department of Health and Human Services, right? Health and Human Services. Well, the reason they're involved in immigration is there have been, I think many of you have heard, many children coming to the United States unaccompanied. Minors unaccompanied coming here seeking refuge. What happens to them? Again, they come, get caught, get put in removal proceedings, and then they are sent to ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and they are in charge of one or two things. Either one, putting that child in touch with a family member in the United States, if they have one, or two, placing them in a location that is going to take care of the child until it's decided whether the child gets to stay or has to go back to their home country. So those are the federal agencies. Like I said, I want you to look at the manual here because tab 12 has a glossary of terms. We cannot go over every single one today because we will never finish, but it's a good overview of the words that you will hear as you are helping people, providing them information. So now let's do a case study. I talked about the different agencies, and let me see how much attention you were paying. But I also know it's complicated, so if you get it wrong, it's okay. That's why we're here. So Rodney wants to apply for deferred action for childhood arrivals. And we heard that today we had 2 DACA holders. He wants to know which agency he should send his application to. So here are the choices. A, USCIS, B, EOIR, C, CBP, or D, ORR. A. Okay, how many say D? All right. Okay, so we had 3 people because we talked about children, but the consensus was A, USCIS, and that's correct. Because remember, USCIS is the agency under the DHS that is in charge of adjudicating or deciding applications. So if I'm going to apply for something, I'm going to put in my application, I go to USCIS. And they are in charge of deciding applications such as immigrant visa petitions. So when my family wants to apply for me, that's where the application goes. Naturalization petitions, those are citizenship petitions. Asylum and refugee applications, as long as you're not in immigration court. Employment-based applications, and in this case, DACA. So that's where we send our applications, USCIS. All right, now let's make sure we all are clear on the different statuses. Now, these are not all of the statuses. These are just the most common statuses that you will hear. First, many people talk about United States citizens as USCs. And like I said, that's the safest form of immigration status because it's unlikely you'll get removed unless you committed fraud to get your citizenship. Then there are LPRs, legal permanent residents, and I'm going to go over every single one of them as we go through the presentation. There are asylees and refugees. There are people who have temporary protected status, and you will hear a lot of TPS holders. There are non-immigrants. Those are people who come here, but they don't intend to stay. They come here as tourists, as students, but they intend to go back to their country. There are DACA holders, and then there are undocumented immigrants. So let's talk about United States citizens. Now, we all know, if you are born in the United States, you are a U.S. citizen. Also, if you are born in certain territories of the United States, you are a U.S. citizen. But what about those of us who were not born either in the United States or a territory of the United States? How do we become citizens? Well, you can naturalize. What does that mean? So I came here, like I told you. I came here, was undocumented for a while, eventually was able to apply for a green card, and then after having been a green card holder for 5 years, I was able to apply for citizenship. And I sent my application to USCIS. USCIS accepted my application, and then I became a citizen. So now I am a naturalized citizen. So that's one way. And like it says right there, tab 1 of your guide will give you more information as to how somebody can naturalize and what the process is like. The other ways, there are 2 other ways of also becoming a U.S. citizen. And these have to do with children. One, somebody who acquires citizenship. So I'm a child, I was born outside of the United States, but my parents are United States citizens. I may have acquired citizenship. Now, the rules are a little more complicated, but that is also covered in Section 2, and I know it'll be covered later. But that's another way of gaining citizenship. You acquire it because your parents were U.S. citizens. So that's another way. And yet another way is deriving citizenship. So say I'm a minor, I come to the United States, I'm a green card holder, my parents are green card holders, but then they become naturalized citizens. Well, if I meet certain requirements, then I am able to derive citizenship. So let's do another case study. So Marcos was born in Puerto Rico. In 2010, he came to the United States. He has lived in the Bronx since then. He is single, and his extended family is all in Puerto Rico. Is Marcos a U.S. citizen? And now, here are the options before you say yes. So option A, yes, but only if Marcos's mom was born in the United States. B, no, because Marcos was not born in the United States. C, yes, because all people born in Puerto Rico are considered U.S. citizens. Or D, no, because Marcos has not applied for citizenship, like I did, since his arrival in the United States. So what's the answer? C. C, all right. And the answer is C, because all people born in Puerto Rico, they're born in a territory of the United States that qualifies somebody to be U.S. citizens. Now, I want to make sure here we say Puerto Rico, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Those are the places where if you are born in those territories, you are a U.S. citizen. I just want to point out that in your packet, there was a mistake. In what is it? Okay, American Samoa was included as one of those territories where if you are born, you are a U.S. citizen, and that is not the case. So scratch American Samoa as an answer for C, because then you're a national, not a citizen. We'll go over that later, but these are the only places outside of the U.S. that are territories where if you are born there, you are a U.S. citizen. Okay, so let's move on. So great, you all had the right answer. So now let's go into LPRs. You will hear that as an acronym that is used. LPRs, green card holders, permanent residents. How do I become an LPR? That's the most common question from many immigrants out there. How do I get a green card? And let's just be clear. Many people will say, well, get to the back of the line. Let's be clear. For many people, there is no back of the line. For some of them, there is a way to get a green card, and we're going to go over that. So either you have a family member who can sponsor you and petition for you, so that's family-based green card holders, and we will talk about it, and the next presenter will talk about it. You could also get your employer to sponsor you, but again, it's not as easy as saying, I have an employer, they like me, they can sponsor me. It's not as easy as that. It's much more complicated, and that also is covered in your manual. There's also the diversity visa lottery. And the idea behind the diversity visa lottery is they said, well, we want to diversify the people who are in the United States. So we're going to encourage immigration from countries that are not really represented in large numbers in the United States. What that means is that countries like Mexico, where I'm from, are not part of the diversity visa lottery. But countries like Mozambique, where there's not a lot of immigration from, they are part of the diversity visa lottery. So you win the lottery, you win a green card. Other ways are as asylees and refugees. You come to the United States as a refugee, or you are here and you win asylum. After a year, you can apply for a green card. Also, if you get something called special immigrant juvenile status, that is for minors who come here who have been either abandoned, neglected, or abused. And if that's the case, they might qualify for a special immigrant juvenile status, SIJ, and they might eventually get a green card. And also, there's people who have suffered violence or abuse at the hands of either a U.S. citizen or a green card holder. Now, if you are a family member who has suffered abuse by a U.S. citizen or an LPR holder, you might qualify for something called VAWA, and you might be able to get a green card through that. But all this to say, these are all very complicated statuses. Some of them involve getting the police involved so that they can help you. Others involve going to family court to prove that you have been abused, neglected, or abandoned. All this means that if somebody wants to know whether they qualify, they have to go see a lawyer to see what their options are. And again, Section 3 of the manual goes into more depth about this. And then there's humanitarian bases to be in the United States. Now, refugees or asylees. A refugee is somebody who's coming from the outside. They come in as a refugee to the United States. United States. And asylee is already here, and then they ask to be in the United States to stay but the reasons are the same. They're staying here because they have a well-founded fear of persecution based on their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And the social group could be gender, it could be sexual identity, it could be I'm a female, and in my country they practice female genital mutilation, and therefore I have a well-founded fear of having to go through that, and nobody's going to protect me. So that's how you can get a green card and how you can stay in the United States as a refugee or an asylee. And there's also another way, is through temporary protected status. Now, currently, there are 3 countries from which, if you are from those countries, you can apply for TPS right now. And this is really important. If we can identify the people who qualify for TPS, they need to apply ASAP because that closes in May. And those 3 countries right now are Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. If people are from those countries and they meet other qualifications, then they might be able to apply for TPS. And then there are other countries, the list of countries are there. Now, what is the reason behind TPS? Well, TPS was created to help those whose countries had a natural disaster, a medical emergency, a war. So, for example, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone right now have TPS because of the Ebola crisis. Haiti was granted TPS because there was an earthquake. So there are various reasons. And TPS is temporary, unfortunately. So every 18 months, TPS holders have to renew their status, and they do not get a green card. So it's a more limited form. And then there are visas. And now it's interesting because here on this slide, there are 3 types of visas that allow you to eventually get a green card. And those are the U visa, which is for victims of qualifying crimes, the T visa for victims of trafficking, and the S visa for informers on terrorists or criminals. Eventually, you can get a green card. So those are those visas. But then you have the non-immigrant visas, and if you have those, those do not lead you to a green card, and those are the visitor visa, B1, B2. So I am coming from Russia, and I just want to go visit the Statue of Liberty, New York, but I'm going back. Well, you have to show that you're really intending to go back, and then you get a visitor's visa. Or I'm a student, and I really want to come study at CUNY, but how do I do that if I'm coming from, I don't know, China? Well, I apply for an F1 student visa. If I get it, I can come, but then I have to go back. And then there are other statuses, which again are limited. We talked about TPS. Well, now there's DACA that we've heard about. DACA allows people to stay here, have a work permit, have a social security number, but it does not give you a path to citizenship. And I know that Sarah will be talking about it a little bit later. And in your manual, tab 4, you will get more information. And the same will be with DAPA. These are statuses that are giving you work authorization, but no more than that. No green card, no citizenship. And of course, then there's the undocumented population. And I think when many people think of undocumented people, they think of people like my dad crossing the border, not being caught. But there's also people who came here with a visa and overstayed. And after they overstayed their visa and they don't have any authorization, they become unauthorized to be in the United States. And they are in the same group as the people who came here without authorization. And now our final case study. So Luis has had his green card since 1996. He wants to apply to become a citizen. He mentions that he has criminal convictions, but they're not a big deal. So what information can you give Luis? And here are our choices. A, tell him that since his convictions are no big deal, he should apply to naturalize ASAP. B, tell him that as long as he doesn't tell and doesn't say anything, his criminal record will never be known. C, tell him how to get certified copies of his criminal record and refer him to an authorized immigration service provider or a private attorney for further assistance. Or D, tell him to never file for naturalization, because no one with a criminal conviction can ever be a citizen. All right, how many say, let me see, A? All right, I like that. Nobody. Because it's always a big deal, okay? Always. Let's keep that in mind. All right, so the consensus was what? And that is right. C, for many reasons. Even if you said, if you said A, you tell him, oh, don't worry, it's no big deal. You're giving legal advice. We should not be giving legal advice. C is the correct answer because all you're saying is, you need to get a criminal record. I'm going to look at my manual and I'm going to tell you how to get it. Section 9 will tell you how to get a certificate of disposition, and then you are referring them to an attorney, a private attorney, or a legal services provider who can help them. So that's the right answer. So with that, there's going to be a Q&A afterwards, but I thank you for your attention, thank you for your participation, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Maribel. That was wonderful. And I also appreciate you reminding everyone to refer to your manuals at the call-in before you answer questions. You need to get this information. Now, for our next speaker, the next topic is family-based immigration from 10:30 to 11:15. And our speaker is Carmen Maria Ray, who is the Deputy Director of the Immigration Intervention Project at Sanctuary for Families. Let's give a round of applause for her.
Back and forth? Got it. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. We are all so excited that you're volunteering to help people get citizenship. So I'm going to be spending the next 45 minutes with you talking about family-based immigration, which is really very, very important because approximately 70 to 75% of people that get green cards in the United States do it through a relationship with a family member who happens to be a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. It is the core of our immigration system. So without further ado, basically, there are 4 ways to get lawful permanent residence in the United States right now as the immigration system stands. And lawful permanent residence, as the earlier speaker discussed, is kind of a very, very good status to have because it gives you the biggest bundle of rights available to an immigrant before he can attain U.S. citizenship. It also is a step that you must go through to attain U.S. citizenship generally. You have to be in lawful permanent resident status, also known as having a green card, for any period from 3 to 5 years before you can be eligible to apply for citizenship in the United States. So the majority of our clients, people who call in, often have a green card and want to know about getting a green card. So there are basically 4 ways of doing it. Number 1, again, the easiest, not easiest, but the most broad number of people get their green card through their family. There are also people who can get their green card through employment. You'll hear, well, can my boss sponsor me for a green card? Yes, that process does exist. I won't be discussing it with you today, but it does exist. There are also humanitarian ways to get a green card. We'll discuss a few of those near the end. And then there's something called the green card lottery. But all of these processes present barriers as well. So these are pathways through which someone can try to get a green card in the United States, also known as lawful permanent residence. But the laws present these roadblocks that prevent some people from being able to move forward on that pathway to actually get their green card. And the most common are unlawful entry. People who came in and the government had never told them that they could come in. So the classic example is someone who comes in across the border without meeting with an immigration officer, saying hello to an immigration officer at the border, and that immigration officer letting them in. There are also people who came in lawfully, so they had a visa, or they were paroled in. The government let them into the country, and they had a right to be here for a certain period of time for a specific purpose, and then they violated the terms of that authorization, often by just overstaying the period of time that the government had allowed them to come in for. And those people accumulate something called unlawful presence, which is a term of art in the law. There are also people who work unlawfully. Working without authorization in the United States, in certain cases, not all, but in certain cases, can prevent someone from being able to get a green card. And then certain criminal activities. as we all know, many people have accumulated certain violations of the law, certain convictions for violating the law, and in certain cases, those can prevent someone not only from naturalizing, from getting citizenship, like the earlier speaker was commenting, but also from being able to get a green card, so the earlier step on the way to citizenship. So for the next 45 minutes, we're just going to focus on the family, on that first category of people that the first category through which people can get their green cards. But you have to keep in mind, you have to really kind of center on this. First of all, we all know we can't give legal advice on the hotline. But also, just because you have a qualifying relationship, so just because you have a family member who's a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, which is the basic tenet to be able to get a green card through family-based petitioning, doesn't mean you can. Not only because of those barriers, but because of many, many other barriers that are in the law that we just don't have 3 days to spend on. So just listed the most common, but there are many, many more. And so it's really important that we never give legal advice, but also that people know, well, if you have a family member that can sponsor you, you really should go talk to an attorney because it's possible that you may be eligible to get a green card. Okay. So basically, the family-based system, pathway to a green card, allows for some U.S. citizens and some lawful permanent residents to petition for some of their family members. There are exceptions to the U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents that can petition. There's some laws that in certain criminal convictions, U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents cannot currently petition for their family members. The government won't allow those petitions to go through, but we're not going to spend any time on that. So generally, U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents can petition for their family members. That petitioning process can sometimes be done together, and sometimes it has to be done many, many years apart, and we'll discuss why. But generally, what at this stage you should know is that the process is available, and let's just move forward a little bit. So what happens is to establish the process for a family member to be petitioned by a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident is actually 2 steps. The first step to the government is that you have to establish that you actually have a relationship with this non-citizen, right? So the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident has to file a petition with the U.S. government in which they establish to the government that the relationship actually exists. And generally, so if you're married, for example, that petition would include a copy of your marriage certificate. It would include a copy of any divorce certificates in the past to show that you were both available, free to marry, for example. If it's a parent-child relationship, you would show a birth certificate or an adoption certificate, but generally you have to be able to establish that relationship by a preponderance of the evidence. Then that petition is filed by the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident that's sponsoring the non-citizen, and then the non-citizen has to file their own petition for a green card with the U.S. government on a form called Form I-485, and that petition for a green card has to be accompanied by some things. The most important one, the one that causes most applications to be denied, is an affidavit of support, and that you'll hear this in immigrant communities a lot. They'll say, oh, I have someone to sign the affidavit. That affidavit of support, it has to be filed by the person who's petitioning for you, generally. So the person that files that first petition with the government has to also support the green card application by filing an affidavit of support. In that affidavit of support, which is an actual legal contract, the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident has to show to the U.S. government that they can support this non-citizen financially in the United States for a certain period of time above federal income poverty level. If they cannot do that on their own salary, in certain cases, they can get another family member or friend who's a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident to be a co-sponsor, to sign another affidavit of support and then demonstrate that they can support this immigrant. Okay? Sometimes those petitions, that first petition by the citizen or lawful permanent resident and the petition by the family member, can be filed together. And we'll discuss in what circumstances that can be. They can be filed at the same time. And the government just processes them sequentially. In some cases, the first petition has to be filed. The family member must then wait for a green card to be available. We call it an immigrant visa, so a green card visa, basically, to be available. And then, once that visa is available, they can then file for their green card application. So, and sometimes that process is many, many years apart. If the process is done in the United States, whether together or separately, the process is called applying for a green card, adjustment of status. If the process is done and the immigrant is abroad, that process is called consular processing, applying for an immigrant visa. Yep. But it's the same process. It's the same application. It's different applications. It's the same qualifications to get that green card. Is everybody clear on that? Yes, okay. So here are the bad news. Well, we talked about this a little bit. You may have the qualifying relationship, you might have the relationship to the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, but you still can't get the green card. In some cases, and this is why it's really important to send someone to talk to an immigration attorney if they have a relationship to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, an immigration attorney, so not a notario, right? That person does not have a law license, not a travel agent, not someone who files taxes, not someone who just files an application, but an immigration attorney who's licensed to practice law. That person may strategize with an immigrant and say, at this time, it benefits you to have your U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident family member file that first petition, but right now, you are not eligible to get your green card. So hold off on that. But file that first petition. It gives you some stability, and then when the laws change, you can file the second petition. But that kind of strategizing can only really be done by someone who has a law license and is kind of aware of the entire field of law and how it looks right now, so that they can really give that legal advice for that person to best protect their rights while not triggering any immigration enforcement against them. Now, in certain cases, and again, this is why attorneys are important, in certain cases, someone who has a barrier to being able to get their green card, right? So they have the family member, they can establish the relationship, so that first petition is fine, but they look at that second petition, and let's say they have a conviction. Let's say they have a conviction because they stole something worth $1,000 from Macy's. Well, generally that conviction might be something that prevents them from getting a green card. But in certain cases, the law allows that immigrant to bypass that conviction or something other that would cause a problem, which is known in attorney speak as grounds of inadmissibility, so things that would prevent you from being able to get your green card. Sometimes you can overcome those by seeking a waiver of inadmissibility. And that petition would also be filed with your green card application, and you would give evidence to the United States that you meet the requirements for that waiver. And often they require a qualifying relationship to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, and they also require some establishment of hardship, that it would be a hardship to your family member who's petitioning for you if you weren't able to get your green card. So in certain cases, those waivers are available, despite the fact that the person, that immigrant, would otherwise be ineligible for a green card. If the immigrant were to file for that waiver application in the United States, it's just a waiver application, you can also apply from abroad with this immigrant visa that we discussed, right? So the waivers are available to you whether you're applying for that second step in the family-based process, that green card application, from within the United States by filing an application for adjustment of status, or from abroad by filing for consular processing. So who can do that first portion for someone? So if you're an immigrant, I was an immigrant once. I guess I'm still an immigrant, although a U.S. citizen. So I am now a U.S. citizen. Who can I petition for? Who can I, let's say, fall in love with and bring to the United States? Well, a U.S. citizen A U.S. citizen has the greatest bundle of rights in immigration law. They are the ones that kind of have the broadest powers. And so under the law, a U.S. citizen can petition for, they can file that first part of the application for their parents, if the U.S. citizen is 21 years of age or older. They can also petition for their spouses. It's very funny, only one at a time. Bigamy, big no-no in immigration law. We don't like it. So you can only be married to one person at a time, and you can petition for that person. Generally, you have to establish certain qualifications to that marriage. It has to be entered into in good faith, and we'll discuss that in a second. You can also, as a U.S. citizen, petition for your siblings. You have to be, as the U.S. citizen, 21 or over to be able to start the process, but then you can file the application for your siblings to get their green cards. And you can also petition for your children. So you can, whether they're single or married, no matter what their age is, that you can file the petition to get them their green cards. And the whole concept, of course, is the definition of family, right? So we define family for U.S. citizens this way. And the idea is that we want family unity in our immigrant communities. So once someone becomes a U.S. citizen, you want them to be able to have their family around them in the United States. You don't want to keep families apart. Lawful permanent residents, on the other hand, although they have a really large bundle of rights for immigrants, they still don't have as many rights as U.S. citizens. So lawful permanent residents can only petition for their spouses, their husbands or wives, basically, and unmarried children of any age. A marriage, for immigration law, is valid as long as it is valid in the jurisdiction into which it was entered. So that means that if the child of a U.S. citizen gets married in, let's say, Egypt, only in a religious ceremony, if Egypt recognizes that religious ceremony as a valid marriage, even without registration in a civil authority, that child is married, and suddenly their lawful permanent resident parent can no longer petition for them. So what's a qualifying relationship? The first point of that family petitioning process that we discussed is that the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident has to establish the qualifying relationship to the non-citizen. So what is it? The legal and valid marriage, if it's a marriage. For purposes of marriage, it can also not be a bigamist marriage. So if you're married and not divorced, like that lovely lady in the Bronx recently, I'm just amazed that immigration didn't catch that. Your marriage can also not be solely for the purpose of obtaining an immigration benefit, right? It can be for any other reason. As I tell my clients, if 99.9% of the reason why you wanted to get married was because this man may one day, please God, be able to get you a green card, that's great. But tell me that there's some portion of you that actually wanted to build a life together with him, because that's the legal requirement, so that you're not just getting kind of into a contractual relationship for purposes of obtaining immigration status. That's a no-no. And then we discussed polygamy, also not good. Bigamy, polygamy, not good. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. All right. So that's marriage. So that's a qualifying relationship for marriage. What if the relationship that you're trying to establish is that someone is your child? Well, generally what the law requires is that person, child, not son or daughter, those two things are different, but if you're trying to establish that someone is your child, you have to generally establish that at the time that you file the petition, that child is 21. Under 21. But there are these laws that say that in certain cases, someone can freeze their age. Some certain acts freeze a child's age at a certain point. You guys don't need to know that. Just let it go. Refer them to an immigration attorney. There are all these novel arguments of how we kind of compute that freezing. But in certain cases, it can be done. Generally, step-parent, stepchild relationships suffice. So for the stepchild to be deemed a child of the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. So, you marry your spouse, and that spouse has children of a prior marriage, well, if the children are under a certain age at the time the marriage was entered into, those children are deemed your children, and you can petition for them to enter the United States as your children, or to get their green card in the United States as your children, which is great. It doesn't require an actual adoption. And then some, if you do want to do an adoption, some adoptions, although not all adoptions, do qualify someone to be deemed the child of a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident for purposes of the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident being able to sponsor them for a green card. So what about brothers and sisters? U.S. citizens can petition for their brothers and sisters. Well, what does it require that you be the brother or sister to be deemed the brother or sister of a U.S. citizen? You have to at least share one parent in common. That's a requirement. Some stepchild relationships do qualify you to petition for your brother or sister. Some adoptions also qualify you to consider this other child your brother or sister. The law is complicated in this arena, and so you really need to send that person to talk to an immigration attorney. But just know that step and adoption relationships also can count. Okay, so let's do a case study. I hear the clicker is broken, so I'm going to ask you all to do some exercise. All right, so let's read the question. So Sandra first came to the U.S. when she was 4. She finishes college at the age of 23. She then marries her boyfriend, Brett. Then she becomes pregnant and gives birth to twins. Her 2 daughters, her husband, and her father are all U.S. citizens. Can Sandra get a green card? Option 1, Sandra can definitely get a green card because her father is a U.S. citizen. Option 2, B, Sandra can definitely get a green card because her husband is a U.S. citizen. Option C, she can definitely get a green card because, taken all together, her father, her husband, and her 2 children are all U.S. citizens. Option D, she doesn't need a green card because she's automatically a U.S. citizen and as her father is a U.S. citizen. Or option E, maybe Sandra can get a green card, but maybe not. We don't have enough information to determine whether or not she's eligible for a green card. How many of you vote for option A? Yes. B? C? D? E? It's E. You don't know. You don't know what her criminal background is. You don't know what really her immigration background is. You don't know, maybe she's committed tons of tax fraud in the interim. You don't know if, she calls this person her father. Is he actually her father? Is this guy actually her husband? The children are too young to petition for her. So we just don't know. Someone like Sandra, you would, if she called and said, well, can I get my green card? You would say, I've got this great list of places that you should go and talk to. You can talk to someone and they can give you a legal analysis of your situation to determine whether or not you are actually eligible for a green card. Although, normally individuals who have a relationship with U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents, there is this pathway for them to get a green card, but you should talk to an attorney. That's the best advice you can give Sandra right now. Okay. All right, I can't read. Yeah. Okay. So we're all, okay. So details about the process that we were talking about before, this petitioning process. So that first portion of the process, the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent residence portion, where they have to establish the qualifying relationship to the non-citizen, the government basically separates people out into people who are deemed immediate relatives and people who are deemed preference relatives. So people who are immediate relatives are spouses of U.S. citizens, unmarried children under the age of 21 of U.S. citizens, and parents of the U.S. citizens who, when the U.S. citizen is 21 years of age or older. Those people can apply for a green card at the same time as their U.S. citizen family member applies to establish the qualifying relationship to the U.S. government. So those folks, the whole process is done at once. They don't have to wait for a visa to become available. There are visas always available for them. They can do the whole process together. The process can, in some cases, take as little as 6 months, from the date that the application is filed to the date that they get their green card. So it's amazing. And then there are preference relatives. And this is where it gets really, the delays get really, really long in some cases. So preference relatives are people who have to wait for a visa to actually, this green card visa, this immigrant visa, to be available, whether they're in the United States or abroad. They have to wait for an actual thing, that this imaginary visa, to become available before they can complete the second portion of their application process and get their green card or their immigrant visa to actually come into the United States if they're abroad. So the US government creates a number of visas every year. There are always more people who need them than there are visas available. And so there's this very, very long list according to the preference category on which you fall. So, for example, preference category 1 are unmarried sons or daughters of US citizens if they're 21 years of age or older. Preference category 2 is the spouse or unmarried child of 21 of a lawful permanent resident. So automatically what you know is that lawful permanent residents, family members of lawful permanent residents, automatically get to wait for a visa to become available. The time that they have to wait depends on how many other people are ahead of them, right? The government keeps track of how long they have to wait in a document called the Visa Bulletin. It's issued by the Department of State, and it's issued every month. And there's no logic to it. Your spot on that list is fixed by the date that the application was filed by your U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident family member. That date is called a priority date. So based on your priority date, you know where you are on the list of visas available. But sometimes the visas advance, and sometimes they regress. And we have no way of knowing prospectively when that will happen. So people often get very frustrated when they're waiting for a visa in one of these category types because there's no real guarantee of when it will become available. You'll notice, for example, preference category 4, the sisters or brothers of U.S. citizens who are over the age of 21. From certain countries, those individuals are waiting close to 30 years for a visa to become available. So all you really need to know is that for certain family members of U.S. citizens, the process is very quick, but can be. But for certain family members of U.S. citizens and for family members of lawful permanent residents, the wait is often very long. Okay? So what happens when you turn 21? Because you noticed that for U.S. citizens, for children of U.S. citizens, there's this flip. If you are under the age of 21 and unmarried, you're an immediate relative, so you get your green card right away, but you turn 21 and you're no longer deemed an immediate relative. So what happens? So sometimes it affects your eligibility, although not often, not always at least. Sometimes it can. Often it just causes you to switch from being an immediate relative to being a preference relative, and so you have to wait longer. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes your age was frozen at the time of application, and so you don't move. You continue to be deemed an immediate relative. So it's all way too complicated to go into because you don't really want me to. It's not that interesting. The possibility exists. So if someone calls and they have a question about they say, I'm turning 21, my father petitioned for me, I don't know what's going to happen, call one of the supervisors over to you. There are tons of them available every day of the call-in. Present this question to the supervisor and let the supervisor, who's an attorney, try to give the individual some idea of how to proceed. Because again, the situation is complicated, but in certain cases, they want to talk to someone immediately. Okay. So remember immediate relatives? People who can get their green cards pretty quickly because they don't have to wait for a visa. That's the number one benefit. That's a great benefit because they don't have to wait. But generally, there's an additional benefit, which is that the government treats those individuals more lightly in the immigration law. So generally, if you entered the United States lawfully, even if you then fell out of status, even if you then maybe worked without authorization, the US government is often willing to look completely past all of that behavior and allow you to get your green card in the United States anyway. So often those people can file the applications together, get their green cards, and move on with their lives. Preference relatives, on the other hand, as we mentioned, have to wait online for many, many years to get their green cards. And there are some exceptions, but if they entered the U.S. unlawfully, or they worked in the U.S. unlawfully, or they've lived in the U.S. unlawfully, those folks often are prevented by the law from being able to get their green cards in the United States. And you've heard, no doubt, of this concept where, individuals are told, well, you can't apply for a green card here, but you can go abroad and you can then come back into the country with your green card. And that process is available, and in certain cases, it fixes some otherwise existing barriers to getting your green card. But again, they need to talk to an attorney, and that has to be a well-considered decision before they leave the US, because there are additional consequences to leaving the country without immigration status. So one good thing about preference relatives is that they can bring their family members with them when they get their green cards. So the family members are included in the petition. So for example, the brother of a US citizen from the Philippines who's been waiting 30 years for his immigrant visa, he's been sitting in the Philippines working and living his life. When he's abroad, so he's going to consular process in with his green card. When he's ready to do that, his wife and his children will be able to, if their children are under 21 and unmarried, come into the United States with him, also with visas. So that is a benefit to being a preference relative. So as I mentioned, the process works this way. First, the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident files the application to establish the qualifying relationship to the non-citizen. You file that on a form called an I-130, and you'll hear, it's so funny because these petitions are they just kind of permeated our culture, and so immigrants will say, well, I got the I-130 filed for me, and that just means that they had a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent family member who filed the first petition in a family-based process to establish that there was, in fact, a relationship between them and the non-citizen. And then the second portion, And then the second portion is the application for lawful permanent residence. So you, I think, are ready for the question for the case study. Lori is a long-term lawful permanent resident, which we also refer to, as you know, as the green card holder or as an LPR in quick speak. So Lori filed a petition for her son, Neil. She's just really happy right now because she's a lawful permanent resident, right? So Neil is a preference relative, so he's had to wait some years for a visa to become available. And so she's really happy because suddenly his priority date, right, his date on that list that he's waiting, that shows that he's waiting for the visa, so the visa bulletin, so his date has come up in the visa bulletin, and he's going to be eligible to apply for a green card. She is hoping that her son will be able to apply for and complete the green card process from abroad, because he's been living abroad this whole time, and come into the United States by fall. And so you run into Lori, and she tells you this, and she also mentions that, oh my God, I'm so happy. Neil is engaged to his girlfriend, Anna, and his wedding is only 2 weeks away. So what do you say to her? Do you say, Mazel Tov? I can't wait to meet Neil and Nana when they move to New York in the fall, after completing the green card application process from abroad, after consular processing into the United States. Do you say, B, that sounds great and all, but have they considered maybe a commitment ceremony or just maybe exchanging rings for now? If they marry before Neil completes his consular processing, he gets approved and he enters the United States and gets his green card, he will not be able to come in through this application, and the process you've done for him will be void. Do you say, if Neil and Anna get married before Neil gets his green card, it'll just set him back a few years in the waiting line, so it will take longer for him to get to the front of the line to apply for a green card? Or do you say, does Anna have a sister? I'm looking for a new girlfriend. How many people say A? B? C? D? B. If they marry before he completes the consular process, gets approved, and enters the United States and gets his green card, the petition that his mother filed for him is completely done, right? Because lawful permanent residents can't petition for their married sons or daughters, yeah? What can fix this? If his mom then becomes a U.S. citizen, she would then be able to petition for him, but he would have to start all over again and wait again on the priority list. Okay. So we just discussed the normal family-based petitioning process. And that's, in my line of work, all I deal with is non-normal immigration cases. So in my line of work, the families we just discussed are happy families. And I deal in the business of very unhappy families. And so my families that I work with are unhappy because they've experienced domestic violence. And the immigration laws of the United States create exceptions to the normal family-based petitioning process in the existence of domestic violence in a relationship. So what's domestic violence? The immigration law defines it as power and control. One part of the relationship, one person in the relationship, exercises power and control against the other person in the relationship. When that power and control is exercised in certain ways that are recognizable, like verbal abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, the government believes that there is domestic violence. In certain cases, someone who could be the beneficiary of an I-130, so someone who is the qualifying relative of a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, those categories of people that we discussed before that can be petitioned for by a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, in certain cases, if they can establish, if that non-citizen, the qualifying relative immigrant, can establish to the U.S. government that they do, in fact, have a legal qualifying relationship to a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, and that that U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident subjected them to domestic violence in their relationship, they can self-petition to get their green card in the United States. So they no longer need that first process, that I-130 process, no longer has to be completed by the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident that's abusing them. Instead, they step into the role of the U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident and petition for themselves for the I-130 equivalent and for the green card equivalent. Everything else pretty much remains the same in this process. The relationships don't match completely the qualifying relationships for the family-based process, but they do, to a large extent, qualifying relationship for purposes of the domestic violence exceptions to family-based petitioning. If the abuser is a U.S. citizen and the abuser is over the age of 21, their parents can self-petition. If no matter what their age, their children and their spouses can self-petition. The people that can't self-petition are brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens. So your brother or sister who's a U.S. citizen and committing domestic violence against you, that gives you no relief. You're still kind of stuck with this normal family-based petitioning process. If the abuser is a lawful permanent resident, only their spouses and children can self-petition for a green card. So only those people are individuals eligible for the exception. The abuse, the domestic violence, parent control that the US government specifically wants to see in these petitions are either evidence of at least one incident of physical violence, which is really basic, pulling hair, pushing, a slap, a pinch, any physical contact in the course of committing domestic violence, or a pattern of behavior that rises to the level of cruelty. And this is really important. If someone self-identifies as having a difficult relationship with a US citizen or lawful permanent resident, they need to talk to either a supervisor on the day of the call, and I would actually really recommend that you have them speak to a supervisor on the day of the call. There's generally at least one of us that is experiencing domestic violence at the call-in every day, and I think probably more, because you want that person to be assured that they have complete privacy in the legal process. Because, of course, if someone is experiencing domestic violence in their relationship, they're often really worried that their partner is going to find out that they're talking to anybody about it, because they'll suffer the consequences. So you want to make sure that they connect with a supervisor on the day of the call, and then they need to talk to an immigration attorney, because often people don't identify the violence that's happening against them in a way that fits within this legal definition until they talk to someone who specializes in this area of law. But what happens if you don't have a US citizen or lawful permanent resident relative? What happens if you just don't qualify for family-based petitioning at all? You neither qualify for the petitioning, you don't qualify for the exception to the petitioning, but you're still suffering crimes of domestic violence. Well, there are two forms of relief that specifically address this. One of them, the earlier speaker mentioned a little bit, the U non-immigrant status, also known as a U visa, and special immigrant juvenile status. So these are basically exceptions to the exception. So generally, most people are petitioning through a normal family-based process. There's an I-130 filed by the US citizen or lawful permanent resident, establishing the qualifying relationship to the foreigner and establishing that they want to petition for them to get their green card in the US. And then there's the green card application by the non-citizen that's filed to establish that there's someone that is eligible to get a green card in the US or to consular process in with a green card if they're abroad. If the relationship is somehow mired with domestic violence, though there's an exception where the non-citizen can self-petition without the US citizen or lawful permanent resident if they can establish the qualifying relationship and they can establish the abuse. But what if there's just no viability of a family-based relationship? Well, special immigrant juvenile status allows that in certain cases, immigrant youth, so in New York, these are folks who are under the age of 21, who can establish that they have been subjected to neglect or abuse at the hands of at least one of their parents, can get their green cards through special immigrant juvenile status. They have to prove that they're under 21 and unmarried. They have to be able to show, to basically go to a state court, and generally we're looking at family courts in the state of New York or Supreme Court. They have to be able to go into that court and file a petition, and they have to kind of fall under the purview of people who that court can take under their jurisdiction. And that court looks at their family unit, and they take evidence about the relationships in that family. And if the court says that it's in the best interest of that child to be allowed to remain in the United States and finds that they were in fact neglected or abused by one of their parents, issues an order, that immigrant can then take that order to immigration and file a green card application. So it's a great form of relief, and we know that there are many, many children in New York who would be eligible for this, but no one's talking to them. So if you do happen to get a call, make sure that you have them speak to a supervisor or refer them to an immigration attorney. And of course, they're children, so maybe getting them to talk to a supervisor that day is the best way to proceed. You non-immigrant status, as the earlier speaker mentioned, you're the victim of a crime, and it's one of the crimes that the government has recognized as warranting a visa. So generally, we're talking about intimate crimes: domestic violence, rape, sexual assault, sexual contact, kidnapping, felony assault. If you're a victim of that crime and you can establish that you had information about the crime that was committed against you, and that you shared that information with a law enforcement agency and so help them in their investigation or prosecution of the crime that was committed against you. And you can obtain a certain document from them saying that. You can then petition the government to get you a U non-immigrant status if you're physically in the country, or a U visa if you're abroad and need to come in. After 3 years with that status, you can then apply for a green card. So this is a bit of a hybrid because it's a visa status that then moves to a green card. But it's actually a really viable way for people to eventually get their green cards. It's a little bit more delayed. Although, again, not as delayed as being the brother or sister of a US citizen. So it's something. All right, last case study of the day. Jean-Jacques was born in Paris on July 14th, 1996. So what are you first doing? You're calculating his age, right? Because that's what we do. We calculate, is he under 21? Is he over 21? He's a citizen of France. In 2012, he came to the United States on a student visa, an F1 visa, and he enrolled at CUNY. His father, Rousseau, visited him in 2014 and became upset at discovering that Jean-Jacques had failed at his school. He beat Jean-Jacques severely. Neighbors called the police. Rousseau was arrested, charged with assaulting his son, and prosecuted by the New York County District Attorney's Office. Can Jean-Jacques apply for immigration status? Yes, no, maybe. How many people say yes? Okay, how many people say no? How many people say maybe? I love maybes. Maybe. You just don't know enough. He remains under 21, so he may be eligible to obtain special immigrant juvenile status if he is, if he can go to a court and the court finds that he was in fact neglected. If not, he may be eligible for immigration status through a U visa. So in conclusion, some family members of U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents may be able to get a green card as a result of that family relationship. Some family